Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're having a look at another devblog for the upcoming update, and this time it is our first technical aviation devblog. Obviously we had the rockets one, talking about the British rockets being added to the game, but now we have our first plane. This is the F3H-2 Demon, and it's going to be coming in for the US at rank 6, and to be honest it's looking like a very interesting plane, which kind of has a bunch of questions around it, which the devblog creates, so we'll get into that in a little bit, but first of all we'll talk about the F3H-2. The Demon itself is an early Cold War era American naval fighter aircraft, so it's probably going to be in the naval tech tree. And you can see in the video, not just the plane itself is a pretty beautiful thing to look at. At the same time, what we see from it is, you know, how actually the pilot model looks really nice as well. But if you want to know the history behind this machine, it says the development of the F3H began in 1949. It was the McDonnell Aircraft Corporation that started work on developing a successor to the F2H Banshee. By the way, if you haven't played the Banshee in the game, the Banshee is actually a pretty fun aircraft. If it doesn't get up-tiered, it generally actually does really well and has a lot of maneuverability behind it and some really fun guns, so I would really recommend it. The initial design work was heavily based off the Banshee, but the final design, which would eventually become the F3H, would be kind of different from the Banshee itself. So what they did with the F3H is they went for a single engine configuration and also introduced a swept wing design, which was a first for McDonnell. And with the outbreak of the Korean War in the early 50s, the Navy's first encounters happened with the Soviet MiG-15, and the Navy found that they didn't have an aircraft which could actually match the MiG's performance at all. And as a result of this, the F3H was hastily put into production, even before technically its first ever test flights were held. And in fact, the F3H would undertake its maiden flight in August of 1951, but it would take several more years until the aircraft was fit for service, and by which time the Korean War had ended. So they tried to hastily push this thing into production, so therefore they would have a counter to the MiG-15, and obviously it's as a lot of these designs do. I mean, you can see a lot of 1945, 1946 American ground designs, for example, came about a little bit too late for them to actually be useful. But then again, it's also incredibly hard to predict the future when it comes to military conflicts, so you can't really blame the people making the decisions. The F3H Demon entered service with the United States Navy in March of 1956, and by this point it had already gained an unfavorable reputation. The main issue that it had was with its turbojet engine, the Westinghouse J40, and it was seen as underpowered and also unreliable. So as a result of this, the aircraft had to be redesigned in order to put a more reliable alternative, which is the Allison J71. Now we are getting the version with the Allison J71, so this should be the one which is, you know, good enough powered, let's put it like that. And then it talks about, due to the various problems that it found, the F3H had a relatively short service life with the USN. It was decommissioned in 1964 and exceeded by a much successful aircraft which we already have in game, the F4 Phantom II. Maybe not the specific Phantom II which we have in game, but still, you know, the family of aircraft. Despite this, as all, you know, American planes go, there was well over 500 units of the F3H Demon which were built, and it did take part in some conflicts during the late 50s. It was there in the Lebanon crisis in 1958, and it was also one of the first US aircraft to be fitted with missile armament. So it does sit its place in history as something which is important, even though it had so many of its shortcomings. So the first thing I want to bring up is two things which are actually talked about in the Devblog itself. And the first one is basically two hints that we are going to get many more jets in this update. And if you actually know, in this War Thunder update last year, so pretty much the update 1.89, which was the updates when we got the Japanese naval tech tree, we also got a bunch of additions as well on top of, you know, obviously the Japanese naval tech tree. And what we saw was a bunch of high-tier stuff. So we got the Japanese naval tech tree, and then of course in ground it was the ADATs, the Florak, the Sturm S, the Stormer, the Type 16, the Ariete, the Leclerc, the Roland. All of these are high-tier vehicles. There isn't a single low-tier vehicle for ground vehicles in update 1.89. And then in update 1.89 for aircraft, the AM1, mid to high tier, the A2D, the ME264, the F3H-2, the Hunter F6, the J5, the RE2002, and the F86K, and then also the Kisarazu. So when it comes to the aviation side of things, it's a lot more mixed, but at least when it comes to the ground, a ton of vehicles were high tier, and there are hints in this Devblog that we are going to get a bunch of more high tier vehicles. It basically talks about how arriving to the game as a new American jet fighter, the F3H Demon will be one of many new additions awaiting seasoned War Thunder pilots in the upcoming major update. And then it talks about, once again, in War Thunder, the F3H-2 Demon will be one of the exciting new additions awaiting seasoned pilots in the upcoming update. What this screams to me is that there are going to be more jets. What it screams to me is that there are going to be more high-tier aviation stuff running around the place, and this is just one of the examples which we're going to see. So I definitely don't think this is just going to be the one thing that we're going to see. Another thing which is very odd, when we look at all of the pictures from this Devblog, they all look pretty beautiful, even though the aircraft itself is not exactly a looker, right? It's not exactly something which we can, you know, it's definitely an ugly duckling instead of a beautiful swan. But one of the things that is interesting is it's missing all of its secondary armaments. And it does talk about in the Devblog what this thing could carry. It also shows in the Cube that there is access to Sidewinders. But one thing that is interesting about this machine, and something which has been talked about for a very long time when it comes to these style of American machines, is the AIM-4 exists. The AIM-4, if you don't know, is a missile which has been missing from the game for a very long time. It is the Falcon. It was the first operational guided air-to-air missile that the United States Air Force used. It was not exactly it was not that useful, but it, you know, generally worked okay, I suppose. And obviously, a lot of people are much more interested in the Sidewinders, the AIM-9s, but machines like the F3H did also use stuff such as, you know, the AIM-4, and it has access to, you know, Mach 3 maximum speed, has access to, you know, an operational range of 10 kilometers, which puts it, you know, at slight differences compared to its Sidewinder buddy. And it's just kind of interesting to think that they talk about, you know, secondary armaments in this, but they don't show any, making it feel like it may be something which they are hiding going forward. You know, they talk about being able to carry a selection of unguided rockets and bombs of up to 2,000 pounds, and also talks about, you know, the main guns that it has, such as it has access to 4 20mm Colt Mark 12s, which will be able to eat anything if anything gets in gun range, because of the fact that it has total ammunition complement of 760 rounds. So this is definitely something which is going to, you know, be able to eat stuff. But at the same time, it says furthermore, what happens to be outside of the cannon's range is more than fair game for the 4 air-to-air missiles carried by the Demon. Now, as I said, it carried AIM-9s, but it also carried AIM-4s. So it's just kind of interesting to see that they've either elected to not show secondary armaments in all of these pictures, or we're hitting a stage where when we look at this aircraft, there's going to be a little bit more that meets the eye when it comes to the new update. Now, I'm not saying we're going to get, new armament options for the Americans, but you do have to remember, we did just have a devblog about unguided rockets for the British. So there may be a chance that we get stuff like the AIM-4s in the game. Who knows? It would be nice to see them. There's a lot of planes that would have access to them, including this new F3H-2 Demon. So there are a few other characteristics. Obviously, this machine is a fighter at the end of the day, even though it does have some multi-role capabilities because, well, it's American. And when we look at some of its characteristics, so it has access to the J71A2B turbojet engine. This gives it about 64 kilonewtons of thrust with the afterburner engaged, and this gives it around about a top speed of approximately 1,157 kilometers per hour at sea level. This is a subsonic plane. So it's not something that's going to be able to blow your doors off. It's not something that's going to, take you to the cleaners when it comes to speed. But maneuverability-wise, therefore, is something it's going to have have a look at. And also another thing to think about when it comes to it is also its BR. If this thing slots into 8.7 with its general armament options, with its general, usefulness of its missiles and also its maneuverability, then maybe we get a very competent machine. But if this thing slots in at 9.3 or something like that, then we're going to have to really struggle with it. It also does have a pretty good climb rate of 72.9 meters per second, meaning that it can get up to altitude quickly, which is great. But they do offer in the devblog a very, very sad little part, which kind of worries me in a way. So it says, however, the F3H-2 remains a subsonic jet fighter. While the aircraft excels at subsonic dogfights, future pilots of this machine shouldn't waste time trying to chase faster opponents, but catch these faster opponents off guard, ideally while they're distracted or in a low energy situation at a low altitude. So for me, I am never a fan of a playstyle which means that the enemy has to screw up. I generally believe in War Thunder, it is like a really bad way of playing. If you as a plane have to, or a pilot, have to hope that the enemy screws up, you are already doomed. You are completely doomed in the game. And it's just one of those things which is incredibly sad to see. So hopefully this machine doesn't get a BR, which puts it up against some very, very fast machines. Otherwise it's going to have a lot of issues. But overall, it is nice to see another American jet. Obviously there will be a ton to come in the future, but padding out that rank 6 area for America is really lovely to see. And as a person who has pretty much had the American tech tree ground out for an incredibly long time, apart from the two new aircraft they've added, it is also nice to see the successor to the Banshee. I've really enjoyed the Banshee. I've really enjoyed the Cougar as well. I think it's a beautiful aircraft, and to see another one added to that list of planes which I'm sure I will enjoy because of its secondary armaments and its usefulness in ground forces, it's just really nice from my point of view. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Eugene's Terry, Daniel Stanton, Blackie, Elove Goat, Jay Wilt, Martinez, B. Young, Chris Giltnane, Trigger Hippie, Ambrosius McClellan, and also Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.